My name is Vanessa Cole. I'm 36. 11 days ago, a process server handed me divorce papers on my own porch while I was holding a grocery bag in one hand and my son's backpack in the other. My husband Derek didn't even come to the door. He sent a stranger with a clipboard. The papers said our business accounts were already frozen, pending division of assets. What Derek did not know is that for 4 months I had been quietly copying every financial record in our company onto a personal drive, because something in our books had stopped making sense a long time before this. He thought he was the one closing the account. He had no idea I was the one who had already opened the real one. Before I tell you what was in those files, take a second to subscribe, but only if stories like this actually mean something to you. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what we built before I show you how it came apart. I met Derek Hale at a hardware supply auction outside Asheville, North Carolina, 9 years ago. I was 27, working the books for a small landscaping crew that was about to fold. He was 29, running 3 guys out of a borrowed pickup truck, underbidding everyone because he didn't know how to price a job yet. He bought me a coffee from a gas station and asked if I'd ever consider doing the numbers for someone who actually wanted to grow something. 6 months later, Hale and Cole Outdoor Design existed on paper. My name on the second half of it, because I built the pricing structure, the client contracts, and the books from the ground up while he ran the crews and closed the deals. We were married a year after that, in his parents' backyard, 40 guests, a borrowed tent, and a cake his mother made herself because we couldn't afford a bakery one. For the first 5 years, it worked. Derek was good at what he did. People liked him. He showed up early, he shook hands, he remembered your dog's name. I was good at what I did too. I kept us solvent through 2 recessions and 1 lawsuit from a client who tried to claim we'd damaged his pool deck. By year 6, we had 11 employees, a real office on Haywood Road, and our son, Eli, who turned 4 that spring. I thought we had built something that would hold. The first thing I noticed wasn't infidelity. It was a line item. In year 7, a vendor called Sapphire Creative Solutions started appearing in our books every month, billed for marketing services, branding, and what Derek called website maintenance. I asked him about it once at dinner. He said it was a contractor he'd found through a guy at the lumber yard, someone helping us get our name out there. The invoices were small at first. $600. $800. I let it go because we were busy and the crews were stretched thin and I genuinely had no reason to think my husband was lying to me about a marketing bill. By year 8, the Sapphire invoices had grown to $1,800 a month, every month, without fail, and there was still no new website, no new branding, nothing I could point to and say, there, that's what we paid for. I started asking more pointed questions. Derek always had an answer ready. Strategy work. Consulting hours. Stuff that doesn't show up overnight. I wanted to believe him because the alternative meant looking at something I wasn't ready to look at. It was Eli, honestly, who cracked the first piece open. He was 6, and one Saturday Derek took him to, quote, drop off some equipment, and Eli came home and told me, completely unprompted, that Daddy's other apartment had a really cool fish tank. I asked him to say that again. He said it like it was the most normal sentence in the world. Daddy's other apartment. I didn't confront Derek that night. I did something else instead. I opened our QuickBooks account on my laptop after he was asleep, and I started pulling every invoice from Sapphire Creative Solutions going back 3 years. I cross-referenced the EIN listed on the invoices against the State Business Registry. Sapphire Creative Solutions was registered 18 months earlier to a residential address on Merrimon Avenue, not a commercial one. The registered agent was a woman named Brianna Voss, 29 years old, who I quickly found had been hired as a freelance social media contractor for our company 4 years prior, for exactly one project that lasted 6 weeks. I am not someone who panics when I find a number that doesn't add up. I am someone who builds a spreadsheet. So I built one. I pulled every transfer to Sapphire going back to the day the LLC was registered, and I matched it against bank statements, lease records I requested through the county registrar, and 3 years of mileage logs Derek had submitted to me for tax purposes, logs that placed his truck on Merrimon Avenue an average of 9 times a month for 34 months, logged each time under a client name that, when I called, had never heard of us. The total I found, sent from our company account to Sapphire Creative Solutions over 34 months, was $214,000. Most of it covered an apartment lease of $1,850 a month under Brianna's name. The rest covered things our actual books listed as equipment, software, and travel. A ring, it turned out later, was filed under equipment. A Caribbean trip for 2 was filed under a client site visit to Florida that never happened. I did not cry over the spreadsheet. I want to be honest about that, because I think people expect the moment of discovery to break you, and for me it didn't. It clarified me. $214,000 of company money, money that belonged to me as much as it belonged to him, had built another woman an apartment, a wardrobe, and apparently a fish tank my 6-year-old found cooler than anything in our own house. I copied every record onto a personal drive over the next 4 months, slowly, carefully, never all at once, so nothing in our shared accounts would show a sudden flurry of activity that might tip him off. I kept living our normal life. I made his coffee. I packed Eli's lunch. I sat across from Derek at dinner and asked about his day, and some nights he told me about a job site, and other nights, I now understood, he told me about nothing at all because he'd spent that day somewhere else entirely. I also did one more thing nobody expected. I found Brianna's husband. She was married. Thomas Voss, 31, worked for a regional bank 2 towns over. I found a wedding announcement from 5 years back buried in a local paper's archive. I sat with that information for 2 weeks before I decided what to do with it, because I wasn't trying to destroy a stranger's marriage out of spite. I was trying to understand the full shape of what I was dealing with. Eventually I sent Thomas a single email, no accusations, just a question. I asked if he was aware his wife's LLC had been receiving regular transfers from a landscaping company in Asheville for the past 3 years. I attached nothing. I just asked. He called me 4 days later. His voice was the voice of a man doing math he didn't want to do. He'd noticed Brianna's spending had changed, noticed trips he hadn't taken with her, noticed a new dresser, new jewelry, an explanation each time that never quite lined up. He hadn't put a name to it because, like me, he hadn't wanted to. We talked for an hour. By the end of it, we weren't enemies. We were 2 people who'd been funding the same betrayal from opposite ends of town. If you've ever found out the truth about your marriage through a number instead of a confession, I want to hear it. Drop it below. And if this is keeping you watching, that's exactly the reaction I'm hoping for, so stay with me, because the part where Derek finds out what I knew is still ahead. I filed for divorce first, 3 weeks before his lawyer's process server ever showed up at my door. Derek didn't know that. He thought he'd beaten me to it. He froze the joint accounts the same week, assuming I had nothing, assuming I'd come to the table desperate and uninformed, the way I always had been with our finances for 9 years, because I'd let him believe that was the arrangement, even though I was the one who'd built the books from day one. We met at our attorney's office on a Tuesday, mine, a sharp, unhurried woman named Patricia Ng who specialized in business divorces. Derek arrived with his own lawyer and a folder of his own, thinner than mine, full of arguments about how the business was founded on his name recognition and his client relationships, how he deserved the larger share, how I had, in his words, mostly handled the paperwork side of things. I let him finish. Then Patricia slid a single printed summary across the table. $214,000. 34 months. Sapphire Creative Solutions. An apartment on Merrimon Avenue. A ring filed under equipment. A Florida client visit that no client could confirm ever happened, because I'd already called and asked them directly. Derek's lawyer asked for a recess before Derek said a single word. When we came back, the tone in that room had changed completely. His lawyer no longer wanted to talk about who built client relationships. He wanted to talk about how quickly this could be resolved quietly. I told Patricia I wanted 3 things. Full ownership of Hale and Cole Outdoor Design, with Derek bought out at fair value rather than walking away with half of something he'd been draining for years. Primary custody of Eli, with scheduled visitation. And restitution for the $214,000, structured as a deduction from his settlement rather than a separate lawsuit, because I wanted this finished, not dragged through years of litigation that would cost more than it returned. Derek tried, briefly, to argue that the money had been, in his words, a business investment in growing our online presence. Patricia asked him to explain, under those terms, how a Caribbean vacation constituted a client site visit. He didn't have an answer. Nobody in that room expected him to. We settled 5 weeks later. I kept the company. Derek kept his truck, his tools, and roughly $40,000 after restitution, legal fees, and the buyout were calculated. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment across town, not the one on Merrimon Avenue. Brianna had already moved out of that one by then, because Thomas filed for his own divorce the same month I filed mine, and neither of them could afford the lease alone once the company stopped quietly covering it. Here's how it settled, because I know you want the full picture. Derek still works in landscaping, now for a competitor 2 counties over, in a role with considerably less authority than the one he used to have. He sees Eli every other weekend, and to his credit, he shows up for those visits, every single time, which is more than I expected from him by the end of all this. Brianna and Thomas finalized their divorce within the year. I never spoke to her directly, not once through any of it. There was nothing she could say to me that the spreadsheet hadn't already said better. Thomas and I still exchange a message every few months, mostly logistics, sometimes just to check in. 2 strangers who happen to find the truth at the same time, from opposite directions. Hale and Cole Outdoor Design is just Cole Outdoor Design now. Same crews, same clients, slightly smaller logo cost, considerably larger margins, since there's no more $1,850 a month leaving the books for an apartment I never lived in. Eli is 8 now. He still talks about that fish tank sometimes, and I let him, because he doesn't need to know what it cost us. He just needs to know his mother is the one who answers when he calls. I think about that spreadsheet sometimes, the one I built quietly over 4 months while making coffee and packing lunches and asking about his day. I didn't build it out of revenge. I built it because numbers don't perform for an audience and they don't change their story depending on who's in the room. They just sit there, being true, waiting for someone patient enough to read them properly. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone sitting across the table from a marriage that doesn't add up anymore, it's this. Don't wait for a confession. Get the statement. The truth is usually already sitting in a number somewhere, and it will tell you everything a person never will. That's my story. If it reminded you to check a statement you've been avoiding, that's your sign to actually do it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.